think that deserves some pain.
Sine of 30 degrees.
Yeah.
What's sine of 30 degrees?
1/2.
Okay. Now, we're going to find the cosine of 30 degrees. So the
that's a
cosine
Jeez.
is adjacent over hypotenuse. Where's our adjacent, though?
Oh, God.
How are we going to find it?
Hey,
Pythagorean theorem.
square plus-
Do it. If you haven't done it yet, some of you already did it. If you haven't done it yet, Pythagorean theorem. 1 squared plus b squared equals 2 squared. B squared equals 30. So that's the square root of 3. Now we can kind of memorize that this triangle has a square root of 3. The other two sides are 1, then 2, then square root 3. 1, 2, square root 3. Cosine is square root 3 over 2. Tangent is the what over the what? So we do the opposite, which is 1, over the adjacent, which is radical 3. But that is a radical in the denominator. So we have to multiply by radical 3 over radical 3. So that gives us radical 3 over 3. So the tangent of 30 is radical 3 over 3. The tangent of 30 is radical 3 over 3. Once you start memorizing these, you're going to know one of them is square root of 3 or radical 3 over 3. You're going to know one of them is that. I remember that it's the 30 because it's like a bunch of 3's. Tangent of 30 is radical 3 over 30. Got 3 3's. Okay, cosecant. How do we find cosecant? We reciprocate the sign, so 2. How do we find secant? Reciprocate cosine. But when I reciprocate that, I get 2 over radical 3. So multiply by radical 3 over radical 3. So I get 2 radical 3 over 3. And then finally, how do we get cotangent? We're going to flip tangent, but I'm going to flip tangent before I rationalize it. So I'm going to look up here. I'm going to flip it before I rationalize it. It will be easier, give me less work. So square root of 3. Yeah. We're going to do the 60s next. And then we'll go back and do the 45s. We're going to do the 60s next because the 60s are in the same triangle as the 30s. It is a 30, 60, 90 triangle that you learned about in geometry, hopefully. So the sine of 60 is opposite. Square root of 3 over hypotenuse 2. Is it a coincidence that that is the exact same as the cosine of 30?
Well, they're the same triangles.
So it is not a coincidence. They're the same triangles and they're the other values. What is the cosine of 60? 1/2. Is that a coincidence, you think, that it's the same as the sine of 30? It's not a coincidence. That is always true for the 30, 60, 90. Yeah.
I thought I remember someone saying, aren't sine and cosine like inverses or something like that, or is that the cosecant?
These are the inverses, yeah. But they are related. They are related, yes. Tangent of 60 is radical 3. Do you think it's a coincidence it's the same as cotangent of 30? Not a coincidence. Then for cosecant, secant, we're just going to flip these. So we've already done that. So you'll see that the cosecant of 60 is the same as the secant of 30. The cosecant of 30 is the same as the secant of 60. And then the cotangent at 60 is the same as the tangent of 30. But if you needed to find them, if you didn't have them memorized, and you drew a 30, 60, 90, you didn't have them memorized, you just drew a 30, 60, 90. You make the short side 1 and the long side 2 and the middle side square root of 30. So you got to memorize something. It's either the triangle or it's the chart. 45, 45, 90, we're using the other triangle. So 45, sine of 45, which 45 do I use?
You choose. You
The exact same answer because they're the same angle. So it does not matter which side I use. I'm going to do sine is opposite over, what is my hypotenuse? Did you do okay. So 1 squared plus 1 squared equals c squared. So 1 plus 1 is b squared. So c squared is 2. This is radical 2. So in a 45, 45, 90, it is 1. 1, radical 2. 1, 1, radical 2. In a 45, 45, 90, it's an isosceles. So we have two sides that are exactly the same, and the radical is a 2. In a 30, 60, 90, we have 3 different sides, and the radical is a 3. Helpful hint. When we have 2 sides that are the same, the radical is a 2. When we have 3 different sides, the radical is a 3.
Whoa.
Okay, now let's go back to what we're doing. Sine of 45, opposite over square root of 2. Can I leave it like that? So we rationalize it. We multiply by square root of 2 over 2. Or, I mean, that's what we get. Square root of 2 over 2.
I mean, you could leave it like that, but it would be wrong.
Would not be
Simplify it all the way.
Okay, so now we're going to do cosine of 45 degrees. So cosine of 45 is 1 over radical 2. Exact same answer. So square root of 2 over 2. Because the x and the y, because the sides are the same, cosine and sine are exactly the same. Tangent
1.
is 1. It's 1 over 1. Side over side, 1 over 1. Then we flip each one. But I'm going to flip it before I rationalize it. So I'm going to go over here and use this 1 over radical 2 before I flip it. So radical 2. If that is radical 2, this one's the same. And cotangent is the same as tangent. So we look at how much you have to memorize here.
45, 45.
It is. And so is this one. It is a little bit more, but if you know the first 3, you can get everything else because these are just switched. And that is just flipped. And you can get everything else. If you can memorize these blocks and these blocks, you can get everything else. Because these are all the reciprocals. And then these 2 are just switched, those 2. And this one is just reciprocated that one. So that's really what you have to memorize. Okay, how are we going to use this today? Now, the way I've set it up in your notes is that you can refer back to the table. You can like have them side by side. Unless you haven't memorized already. What's the sine of 30 degrees? So when I asked you like a lot,
1.5.
and you all were joking around with me, remember? What's the sine of 30 degrees? Okay, so here I see a 30-degree angle. I see it. There it is. And according to this given angle, which side is the x? It is the adjacent side according to that angle. And according to that angle, which side is the 8? Hypotenuse. I'm going to ignore the y for a moment. That's why it's in a different color. I'm ignoring it just for a moment. We are going to find x. So since I have the adjacent and the hypotenuse, which function should I use? What uses adjacent and hypotenuse? Cosine. Question?
No.
So cosine of 30 degrees is equal to the adjacent x over the hypotenuse 8. That is true. The cosine of 30 is equal to the adjacent over the hypotenuse. What's a cosine of 30 degrees?
3 over 10.
So here we don't have it memorized yet. We have the chart in front of us. The cosine of 30 degrees. So this cosine of 30 degrees is equal to the square root of 3 over 2. Is that what you said? The cosine of 30 is equal to the square root of 3 over 2? I'm just going to bring down x over 8. And I will cross multiply to solve for the x. Or you might be able to look at it and figure it out. But if you can look at it and figure it out, great. Otherwise, we're going to cross multiply. So I get 2 times x equals 8 times radical 3. Now we have to remember our radical rules, our square root rules. We have to remember them. You cannot multiply the 8 and the 3 together. The 8 goes outside. And then what do I have to do to get x by itself? So we have to remember our radical rules. When I divide by 2, I can only divide the 8. I can't divide the radical by 2. Get x equals 4 radical 2.
3.
Radical 3, yes. I don't know why I said that. There you go. All right, now we need to find y. So we're going to kind of go through the same process. Y is which side according to the 30-degree angle? Y is the opposite. Now, I am not going to use x. Whoops. I'm not going to use x because what if I made a silly mistake over here and I got a wrong answer? And then I use that wrong answer to find y. I'm guaranteed to get a second wrong answer. So I'm not going to use x at all.
Well, 2 wrongs make a right.
True. I
don't
got
know
that.
when that is occurring. But so I'm going to use the one that's given to us along with the opposite. What uses opposite and hypotenuse? So we're going to do sine of 30 degrees is equal to y over 8. What's the sine of 30 degrees? 1/2 equals y over 8. So we take out the sine of 30, make it a half. And we cross multiply. 2y equals 8. So y is 4. So you might be able to look at the y right here and go, half? Well, that's got to be 4. Like you might be able to look at that, and that's fine. If you can't, cross multiply. Next one.
This goes up.
Yeah.
Can you, since it gives you the angles, you know that the triangles are going to be similar, so can you just say that the original triangle is like, the new triangle is like 4 times the size?
You totally can, and you're more than welcome to figure it out that way. No, you can do it that way. If you have your value, I just want you to memorize your values.
Yeah.
Okay? You can do it that way. I know you guys learned stuff in geometry that kind of teaches us a different way. The reason why I'm teaching it this way today is because it's going to lead us into the next example tomorrow. But if you want to do it that way, if you see it, that's fine. Some of them are kind of harder in your homework. Just heads up.
Easy.
Yeah, these are pretty easy compared to the homework. But you guys have plenty of time to work on the homework in class. I had lots of people get done. All right, next one. So we're going to find, let's just find x first. According to 45 degrees, x is which side? You have to go off the angle. This is the adjacent. You always have to go off the angle that's given. And then 10 is the hypotenuse. So what uses adjacent and hypotenuse? Cosine, because it's AH. Cosine of 45 degrees is equal to x over 10. Now we say, what is a cosine of 45 degrees?
We look back at our chart.
Square root of 2 over 2. So we're going to take cosine of 45 degrees, make it square root of 2 over 2 equals x over 10. Cross multiply. 2x equals 10 radical 2. Remember your radical rules with multiplication, with division. X equals 5 radical 2.
And since it's I squared, what's what's the name where they have two equal sides?
Hmm?
Isosceles? No, is that-
Okay, so looking at this triangle, this is an isosceles triangle. It is. This side is congruent to this side. How do I know it's these two sides and not that one?
Because that's the hypotenuse.
Okay, so the hypotenuse is always more.
Yeah.
But when it is a 45, 45, 90, we've got congruent sides. So I don't have to do the work for y. You can totally do the work for y. You don't have to. Y is going to be exact same as x. They're the same. So once you find x, if you found it correctly, then y would be the same. But if you found x wrong, then you're going to get both wrong. So just set that. All right, there's two that you try. Okay, so can you tell me how you're doing them? Great. Which is fine. You can totally do it that way. Okay, so I would say if you might get stuck, and if you do get stuck, then try it. See, these are, if you have those memorized, that's totally fine.
Nice job, Kyle.
No, I don't. Yeah, like I said, people had it done in your time. I think you might be the first person today that actually, that I've seen. I've only done half of our class, but actually remembered those. Wait, are you doubling up right now?
Yeah.
That's why you do. See, I'm not gonna reteach it, because half of you all forgot it. The problem is when it's like a trick, you don't remember it.
I remember everything.
Okay, then I'm guessing you have on your paper what Kyle has on his paper then.
No, I just prefer the other way.
I don't.
You know, the way more.
Do both of them, and then I'm handing out your assignment. You haven't done the portion.
Oh yeah, there's
So what are you using to find your paper?
Let's just guess. I forget how to do it. I didn't write that.
Okay, so y, according to this angle, is which side? Okay? And then 12 is the, so what uses opposite and hypotenuse? Okay, so you want to write down sine of 30. Then you gotta put the opposite over the hypotenuse. Right. That's not fun. It's a little bit more challenging than the examples we just did. Oh, one second.
you're solving for b, right? So you divide both sides by radical 2. So,
Plus you.
we got x. What kind of triangle is that? What's that? Angle? What number is it? Yeah. So, if both angles are the same, both sides are the same. So you did that one. Some help? So you got half equals y over 12. And then you do 2 times y. So you're going to cross multiply. 2 times y equals 12. Use that diagonal across. Okay, I turned it, I wouldn't use this right. Okay, so we're gonna go 2 times y equals 1 times 12, so 2 times y equals 12, so we've got 2 1, does that say 2 1? So it should say 2y equals 12. Because we cross, when you cross, you take these, 2 fractions and make them into just not much. So then what's y equal? You wrote 6y. So what you said on the paper, I don't know what you meant, but you meant, I mean, what you wrote was 6 times y. But you want to say y equals 6. Then we have to do x. So you have to do, so you can't do them at the same time. Then you have to get confused. So now we do the second one for x, and we're going to do the same way we did this one up here. Yeah, this is- You can, but it's gonna take you like 4 times as long, instead of just, once you've done these a bunch, like we do this, you're gonna have them memorized. Or plan, you might have memorized, it's gonna save you a lot of time. You can do Pythagorean theorem. Can. Or we could just say, we're doing adjacent. Adjacent is, we're doing percent, we're doing adjacent, we're doing percent of 30. And that's what you gotta memorize, so you can start your memorize it quicker. Radical 3 over 2 is equal to, what is a what? That would be the one next to it. Here is, oh gosh.